What's going on, guys? Mickle here. We just got some breaking news in the Ripple SEC case you guys need to see. Ripple just filed a motion to the court on why they should be allowed to have the 53 emails revolving around Ethereum's free pass speech by Bill Hinman. Ripple dropped some absolute bombs in this document, and we got some brand new evidence we have not seen before. It's starting to really look like XRP was directly mentioned by the SEC in Will Hinman's previous emails regarding the Ethereum free pass speech. You guys are not going to believe this, and it could rip this case wide open and create some huge issues for the SEC going forward. I'm also going to be showing you guys towards the end of the video when Jeremy Hogan thinks a settlement is going to take place, but not only that, but what it's going to take to drive both parties to the table and cause a settlement to happen. You guys are not going to want to miss this video. We are breaking down brand new evidence that is going to change the dynamic of this case going forward. If you guys are new to this channel or come here all the time, make sure to like and subscribe. It does so much for me in the YouTube algorithm, and it's completely free. If you guys do not have an Uphold account already, make sure to sign up using the link in the description below. With that said though, let's jump right into it, and I hope you guys enjoy the content. Alrighty guys, let's not waste any time and jump right into this newest filing. This was one of the most explosive filings out of Ripple I have seen yet. It is still very early on, and I'm still looking at a lot of lawyers breaking this down, but we have already seen some huge things pointed out that we have not seen before in this case. I believe this is one of Ripple's best filings, and I think it's going to show you guys how weak the SEC's arguments really are. So right here at a James K. filing, Ripple and individual defendants have filed their response explaining why Hinman documents are not irrelevant as the result of Judge Torres's decision on the motion to dismiss. So the SEC was trying to say that because of some random other motion in this case, the SEC shouldn't hand over the 53 emails regarding the Ethereum free pass speech done by Bill Hinman, and Ripple's kind of just coming out and saying, well, that's a load of crap. There's no way that makes any sense. And Ripple's filing says exactly that, and it is awesome. One of my favorite statements in this entire thing is right here when Ripple's essentially just breaking down how absurd on its face this entire case is, and I think this is great. It's in plain English and is going to tell the court how insane the SEC's arguments are. The SEC alleges that the individual defendants acted at least recklessly with respect to these questions, even as employees and officers at the SEC, including Hinman, were simultaneously trying to understand the interaction between how he factors and an entirely new medium, digital assets like Bitcoin, Ether, and XRP. So what Ripple is saying is the SEC is trying to say that Ripple knowingly did something wrong while the SEC itself was still trying to figure out its own views on what digital assets even were. Ripple is directly telling the court it is absolutely insane that we could have knowingly done something wrong when the SEC themselves didn't even know yet if we had done something wrong. And this was in 2018. The SEC is trying to say that Ripple knowingly did something wrong in 2013. Back in 2013, I don't even think the SEC knew what a digital asset was. The first indication that they even understood what a crypto was in 2017, 2018. And they claimed back in 2015, back in 2013, and all those years prior, Ripple should have known what they were doing was wrong. Well, the fact of the matter is, Ripple had no idea what the SEC was going to say. The SEC could have came out, and the funniest part is they did, but the SEC could have came out and said, everything you're doing is fine. This in no way is a security. Based on all of Ripple's research, based on everything lawyers have told them, everything they were doing was A-okay. So it is so insane, and Ripple's pointing this out in plain English straight to the court, that the SEC is trying to say that all these years prior, without any warning, and with SEC officials actually telling Ripple at the time that what they were doing was okay, it is so insane that the SEC is now retroactively saying, oh, never mind, we actually decided that it's not okay. The SEC's entire case against Ripple falls flat on its face. They are trying to say that XRP itself is fundamentally a security when their own laws, their own guidelines of what constitute as a security does not indicate that XRP should be. The SEC is trying to tell Ripple that they have been blatantly not following the law when the SEC hadn't even provided any laws to follow. There is nothing about this lawsuit that makes any sense. And the SEC knows it. That's why they are not bringing any new evidence to the table. They don't have any evidence. They simply sued Ripple and hoped that the courts wouldn't do any research into any of this and they would just believe the SEC because they're the SEC. This is blatantly obvious because as more evidence comes out, it is becoming painfully obvious that Ripple tried to be responsible regarding their sales of XRP. They tried to do all the research. They concluded there was no way XRP should be a security. Almost everyone in the market came to the conclusion that XRP shouldn't be a security. And now the SEC is trying to retroactively come back at Ripple and say that they should have known the entire time that the SEC was going to take this outrageous stance. This lawsuit is a sham. Let's keep moving though, because there was even more gems in this, and I thought this was huge. Boom. No doubt XRP was mentioned in the Hinman emails, and this goes to the fact that many people in the past had been speculating that XRP was likely directly mentioned in the 53 emails leading up to Ethereum's free pass. If it was, this would be so explosive because it would show that the SEC blatantly disregarded their own analysis of XRP and yet chose to only go out and give clarity to Ethereum. This would bring up huge conflicts of interest going at the agency and would have shown their direct internal thinking regarding XRP. It is very likely that their internal thinking stated that either XRP was not a security or they weren't sure what XRP was, because if it wasn't one of these two instances, then why wouldn't they be putting these emails front and center? They are clearly trying to hide these emails, and right here in this most recent filing, we get some very juicy information that it is actually very likely that XRP was in fact mentioned in these 53 emails, and this is horrible for the SEC. The SEC should not be permitted to argue to the fact finder that Mr. Garlinghouse and Larson were reckless not to recognize that XRP purchasers saw XRP as an investment in a common enterprise while concealing potentially that the SEC's own director of division of corporation finance had analyzed a substantially similar digital asset and maybe even XRP itself and concluded it was not. So what Ripple is saying is, first of all, how can the SEC be coming out, Mr. Garlinghouse and Mr. Larson, and saying they were reckless when Mr. Garlinghouse and Mr. Larson were simply listening to the SEC? The SEC stated Ethereum was all set. So judging by anyone with common sense, it would have seemed like XRP was all set, but they go a step further and say that it is very likely that Mr. Hinman also analyzed XRP. You need to remember, almost a large portion of Ripple's legal team came directly from the SEC. So I don't think Ripple's simply saying this because they thought, oh, maybe it's a possibility. I think they know that Hinman talked about XRP. And I think this is why the SEC is so desperate not to hand over these emails. They know that these emails are going to blow up this case for them. I think this is huge, and this has been being speculated very recently by a lot of different lawyers following the case, and now Ripple is backing this up. I have a feeling it's true, and I have a feeling that XRP is in those emails. Now, Fred kind of wrapped it up for us. He said, thus, the entire premise of the SEC's letter is wrong. That about sums it up. Judge Netburn has all the legal authority she needs to rule in Ripple's favor. Of course she will, with a question mark. I think she will. I think these emails are going over to Ripple. Yeah, the courts have already ruled multiple times that Ripple should be entitled to these emails. The SEC has continually tried to re-argue it and re-argue it. Eventually, I don't think the court is gonna believe that the SEC should simply be able to change the court's opinion. I don't think the court's opinion has ever changed. I think they've allowed the SEC to keep re-arguing it because they want this decision to be set in stone. They don't want the SEC to come back afterwards and have substantial evidence to appeal it. They're addressing all the SEC's concerns and rejecting it time after time after time. I think, once again, the SEC is going to be forced to hand over these emails, and once the SEC is forced to hand over these emails, I think the case is over. The last gem I really pulled out of this was the fact that we have talked about on a while, the SEC personally attacking Brad and Chris was a tactical mistake of epic proportions. This is because the SEC had no right to attack Brad Garlinghouse and Chris Larson. There are zero signs of fraud in this case, because at the end of the day, Ripple didn't do anything wrong. So trying to say that Brad Garlinghouse and Chris Larson committed fraud is insanity. But it actually completely backfired on the SEC, and we've been talking about this for a very long time. The fact that they made these outrageous charges actually made it a lot easier for Ripple to get a lot of these documents that are significant to proving that the SEC is completely out of line here. So the fact that the SEC brought these cases of fraud actually made it a lot harder for them to win this case. And I'm going to show you an excellent example of this right here. There is evidence in the SEC's possession that bear directly on Mr. Garlinghouse' contemptuous state of mind concerning the central question of the claims against him, his understanding as they related to the status of digital assets in general and XRP in particular in ways that are relevant to the application of the Howey test. It's hard to see what could be more relevant to the claims against Mr. Garlinghouse. So Ripple is saying, the Ripple legal team is saying, the SEC has evidence that directly states whether Brad Garlinghouse and Chris Larson were knowingly doing anything wrong by selling XRP. The fact that the SEC is trying to hide this is insane. They're the one who brought these charges. If they have the evidence, let's bring it forward. Let's see the evidence. But the SEC is choosing to hide it instead because they know that the own evidence that they have actually goes against them. This is how insane this case is and how poorly it was brought by the SEC. The SEC is on trial right now. The Ripple is destroying them. They are on the full offensive right now, and the SEC is going to be lucky to make it out of this with a settlement. And Fred actually summarized this very well, and this has to go with when we will see a settlement, but most importantly, what we're going to need for a settlement to take place. Fred tweeted out, I go back and forth often on settlement. With the absurd delay tactics by the SEC govs over the last 3 weeks, my base case now for a settlement is one of these has to happen. Congressional action, the SEC is forced to hand over the emails, or a summary judgment. Well, I think summary judgment, Jeremy Hogan has already said multiple times, is highly likely, and it's looking like, to me, there's no way the SEC won't have to hand over these emails. They are delaying and delaying and delaying, because like I always say, delays are the only weapon the SEC has. They don't have evidence, so their tactic going forward now is just to make stuff up, delay, hope to get Ripple in a worse position, burn Ripple out of some money, but Ripple's on the right side of the law. The court knows it, we know it, and pretty much anyone who's looked at this case for more than 15 seconds knows that the SEC brought a case that didn't even make any sense. Last of all, I want to share with you what Jeremy Hogan had to say regarding a settlement. And this actually came directly out of a filing today in which the SEC asked for a week extension. Of course they did. Like I said, it's all they have. They're going to keep extending. They can't bring evidence, so they're just going to draw this thing out. But there was actually a gem in here, and the SEC, let's just read this. The SEC is requesting for an extension, of course, but look at footnote 2. Ripple is suggesting that initial summary judgments briefs be filed in May. The SEC, of course, is saying that's too soon, but the end game is in sight. So in May, we should see that they should start drafting summary judgment. But what does this have to do with a settlement? XRP Crypto Wolf says, is there a high probability of the SEC settling the XRP lawsuit in April or May? Jeremy Hogan says, generally speaking, settlement is mostly filed after discovery is closed and before summary judgment briefs are filed. They are not quite finished with discovery yet, but almost, and it looks like summary judgment briefs will be filed in May or June. So that means April and the beginning of May are going to be months that a settlement is highly likely, and we should be on high alert. That is right around the corner. I think that if the SEC is forced to hand over these emails, just like Fred said, a settlement will be imminent. Guys, thank you so much for coming. I'll have more information as it rolls out, as more lawyers are able to digest these documents. This is my initial thoughts. I think it looks really good for Ripple. Thank you so much for coming. Please like and subscribe if you're still here. It means so much to me. For now, Mickle out.